All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Spiritual Gangster Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Piraldi, and today we're working on our guest spotlight, and we're having a conversation that is going to be about the invisible transformations people go through while still showing up for life, leadership, caregiving, grief, and the quiet emotional labor so many carry behind closed doors. Today, we're talking to Tamera Schmidt, speaker, advisor, founder, and enlightened coach. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I am delighted to.
I am so excited to just hear what you have to say. So what I want to do first is, for listeners meeting you for the first time, who is Tamera Schmidt beyond these credentials and the titles? Who is she?
I am a woman that has seen a lot of life, been in corporate America since graduating college, had many a setback, many an opportunity to grow and develop, and eventually would arrive at running my own company, which has a whole story we can talk about behind that. And most of all, I live this life believing that good will attract more good. And
Absolutely.
yet all of us are looking for that connection, that opportunity to really shine your light and get through challenges as we go along the way. So while I love Spiritual Gangster Podcast as a title, I would say that I am a positivity um, guru as we kind of get through the
Uh-huh.
weeds of life itself.
Okay, wonderful. So you blend neuroscience and leadership and emotional intelligence and healing all together. How do those worlds, how did those worlds become connected for you?
um, Early on in my career, I discovered I had perhaps an unfortunate knack to be involved in transformational change. And that was an enormous amount of what I did in corporate America and had many, many, many leadership jobs, etc. And I think any of us that are listening to that have gone through some form of transformation. And I reached a point in time where I realized we were kind of just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic because people are numb. And so I went back to school and I trained as a neuroscientist and focused on the opportunity to figure out how we grow, how we learn, how do we get through the hard stuff, or more importantly, how do we get on with things itself. And so I then started applying all of that to my work, etc. And then my personal story that we'll probably touch on, with which is how all this came about, will understand help you understand why grief and caregiving and all those other things started infusing into my world.
Okay. So, was there a defining moment there in your life that changed
Oh,
how you view success and identity and leadership?
oh yes. Oh yes. I mean, I think that we are all always learning. And I think that the best of people that lead should be focused on that. But I mean, living life large, right? So, the underneath the covers, as a terribly highly promoted, effective leader in corporate America using all that new neuroscience that we talked about. Um, One day we get a phone call, and my husband has been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer.
Oh my God.
And so, the personal element of the story was, when you're usually high performing, etc., you're safe in your workplace, etc. Yeah, well, we had a lot of politics going on and everything else. So, as my life tipped upside down, literally, and the kids were young, etc., I was going to be laid off from corporate America.
Oh, so-
And there's, new manager really wanted me out of the way. There's no way I would have made it to the layoff list, fondly known in corporate America as a RIF. But she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is awful. We need to let her be with her husband. There's just," and all these executives, "Oh, yes." So next thing you know, I'm unemployed.
Oh,
He's dying. Let's be really
yeah,
direct here,
yeah.
etcetera, and so my whole life flipped upside down at that point, and so I really had to dig deep to pull lots of things in and establish the story, and figure out how to get to the other side.
So when your life is like falling apart like that, I mean, that type of diagnosis, obviously, that's gutting. And then to lose your job on top of it, like what did you do? Like, how did you know what to do next? Like, how
Oh,
did
I
you not
didn't.
just give up?
I didn't, and I think that's kind of the work I've begun doing, which is I have found in myself and thousands of times since, there are just people in this world, including myself, that when adversity smacks them in the head, literally, they keep functioning, they keep showing up. I've had many a friend that was supporting me during that time going, "I wouldn't be able to get out of bed." And I'm thinking to myself, that's nowhere on the menu.
Yeah, I don't, it's not an option.
It's not an option. And I think it's also when, at least for me and the people I've worked with since, have turned to their, greatest competencies. I'm a doer. I'm a fixer. That's been my entire story in life. And so I needed to figure it out. And yes, there's 10 million new things on the list, but I'm not remotely unique. That's what I found out. I think there's a small percentage that might check out, but I think that's an extraordinarily unusual sequence. I think most people keep going.
Yeah, when you're put at, you have no choice of which direction to go. You're either
Yeah,
gonna sink or swim. And
yeah.
and you gotta pull up your, pull your your boots up by the bootstraps really, and just kind of make it work. I'm curious to know what inspired the concept of the during.
Oh, I love that question. Thank you. It's because as I continued to work with coachees and in my own life and however I showed up, I really realized, really bouncing off of what you just asked about, how do you keep going?
Mhm.
Um, we are all, many of us are functioning in the during. It's this idea that we are highly functional people navigating seasons of sustained pressure, uncertainty, grief, reinvention, or change, but we're still going to perform or
Right.
show up or get stuff done, right? And
Mhm.
so the during is literally that middle piece. We're going to keep going during dot, dot, dot. And I think most people I ever work with, including myself or talk to, people seem to think it's one or the other. Oh no, I think most highly functional, usually incredibly amazing people just keep going. Therefore, the during kind of came to light as a concept and a place to explore.
Oh, wow. I like that. And it definitely resonates. I mean, so many of us are in the during, trying to figure out which way to go, and stopping's not an option. We got to keep going. What happens when the version of yourself you built your life around no longer fits? What do you think about that? So, like, you've got this perfect thing, life is lifing how you want it to, and then all of a sudden it just doesn't fit. So what
I
happens with the version of yourself?
I think it is a play. The version of yourself actually is, what am I good at right now that I can do? So if you tie it to my personal story that kind of led to this blending, um, my husband had a caseworker, and I, the primary caregiver, had a caseworker. Okay.
Mm,
And I would say that being a alpha male that wants to retain all the dignity he can, etc., and in these sequences, you do get social security benefits for the at least the kids and him,
Yeah.
etc. And his first response when I tried to set it up was he's not going to give me any of the information to talk to Social Security because he's gonna provide for his family, et cetera, and if you lock me out, I can't do anything for you, and obviously, with the nature of that disease, there'll be a time his brain can't process and everything else, so a person like me leans into what I'm really good at. So I went back to the caseworker who's supposed to help me, and she's like, "Oh, woe is me." And I'm like, "I'm not a woe is me kind of person. We're going to figure this out."
Yeah.
I immediately identified that there is all of us have congressional representation that will work with you to meet with Social Security if you have to change something.
Mhm.
And so I just figured out a fix and got to them. They got to Social Security. And the next thing you know, I could help him with his processes so more didn't fail. So I think the first thing that happens when our whole lives tips upside down or what we are changes is we will, I think, very naturally lean into what we're really good at,
Yeah.
you know, to solve some problems just to stay afloat.
So what role do you think that honesty plays in all this kind of transformation that you're doing?
I think honesty disappears off the face of the earth, in complete candor. People don't want to know how you're really doing in difficult times. And every now and again, you really do want to say the answer, and you immediately learn, ooh, you're going to edit that down quickly. And so, honesty has to be provided to yourself,
Yeah.
and you need to gather some, trusted, maybe gather a new tribe, that can listen to those pieces or share insights or help you carry the burden. But you also immediately start repackaging because people don't really want to know.
What role do you think that the nervous system regulation plays in leadership and decision making? Since you've been throughout, leadership roles and such, what do you think that nervous system regulation, how do you think that plays into the decision making?
I love that question. Here's the thing. From a neuroscience perspective, if
Yes.
you're about to see one of my geek out topics,
Yes. That's what I
uh,
want.
yes. So, um, we all have a reptilian brain, and my shtick about that is the reptilian brain is a 15 million-year-old high performing machine from back when, right? And I've been telling this for so long, it may be 16 million years old now. And and it takes over when fear, uncertainty, doubt, and it basically is telling your body, fight and flight, I'm going to die. And so, from a neuroscience perspective, understanding how you might get to the frontal cortex, which is the only place that change can occur, is a paramount part of my work with anybody I work with. I mean, I think it's really easy. And in our topic today, you can imagine I I think most of us would end up in the reptilian brain the moment this big stuff happens to you.
Right.
And the simplest way that I always love to encourage people to think about is and scientifically, you can create new synapses. You can bypass all of that if you know how to get to the frontal cortex. And the simplest practice is gratitude. And how many of us practice it on a regular basis? How many of us have muscle memory to deploy it?
I think gratitude is huge.
It's enormous, and it's the simplest way. There's a lot of other scientific things, and I laugh. So you asked about leadership, sometimes I'm running the field onboarding, for, hundreds of people a month joining, revenue generating organizations in corporate America. And, I'm gonna infuse the neuroscience when I'm doing all of that, and, it's a new job. Guess what? Probably in reptilian brain, right now, et cetera, et cetera. And so at the very end of all of these sessions or working with a client in leadership anywhere, I'm always telling them, "Okay, how are you going to get to your frontal cortex? How are you going to get out of your reptilian brain? What is your daily, weekly, monthly practice?" And a little comedy. So what ended up happening is I would often pair new hires from different functions so they could interact with each other when they left the room. And I would, give them the script for their calls back and forth. And using that neuroscience technique, I said, I am absolutely fine if this is how the conversation with your partner goes. Hi, I'm glad you picked up the effing phone. Life is hell right now, but I am so grateful you're here. Something that simple to get it out, get it through. You asked about honesty. That's a pretty honest way to start a challenging conversation and utilize the neuroscience techniques. Have a little bit of gratitude, frame it up quick, and go.
Absolutely. Now, touching back on like the grief and the caregiving aspect that you
Yeah.
had to go through, what do you think that grief teaches us about identity?
That we may be wed to a version of our identity that may be burning to the ground as we speak.
Was it your husband's diagnosis that was the hardest season? Like, and what did it teach you about yourself?
I would say any hard season would teach at least me to go inwards and identify some true north, some way to get back to myself. Because I think, particularly in my example, the caregiving and all, I'm doing everything for everybody while living in anticipatory grief
Right.
because I know he's going to die.
Right. It's inevitable.
Right. And then with his particular diagnosis, and it's brain cancer, and they've taken out a part of his brain because of the tumors, I'm not even wedded anymore to my life partner. There's somebody entirely different showing up.
Right.
And so, I think anytime we are pushed into that role, you're going to be in your hardest season. What I learned about myself, I don't like using the word resilience. I don't like
No?
saying that I'm strong. No, because it leads to greater loneliness for any of us because we show up, wow, she's so strong. Oh man, did I hear that thousands of times, right? And in fact, the second part of that story is at 4 months of disability, he was sent to Cobra. And I couldn't get hired in a new job, not because I wasn't a top performer and well known in the industry, etc. It's because doing the full time caregiving, I couldn't show up for the interviews. I had one scheduled. And it's like, Tam, we need you with the doctors. Something's gone terribly wrong. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm a no-show, right?
Right.
And so that's when I launched my company, because I had to do something. And at that point, it offered me almost a respite from that world I was living in. So maybe the thing that I've learned the most importantly is find one thing for yourself
Yeah.
in this journey, that allows you to keep showing up.
Okay. I'm curious to know, how do we when we go through like when we go through heartbreak and burnout or disappointment, how do we stay emotionally open after that? Like how do we Hmm.
Yeah, that's back to that neuroscience piece, it's an itty bitty little thread, right? What can I be grateful for today? You break it as
Bringing
small
it
as
back to gratitude? Okay.
right. And because, as we know from a neuroscience perspective, that reptilian brain will kick your bum to the curb over and over and over again. And you've touched on something too. And then I would also say you've got to find some small piece or place that you can be completely authentically honest, because we're all high functioning and we're going to keep showing up the best we can. I mean, I'm sorry, when I'm supposed to be interviewing because I know we need a job, for everything that's going on. And the doctor texts me. I was actually down in the garage of the hospital preparing to go into the interview, because I knew I needed to do X, Y, and Z with him and all. And then, get back here now. Well, how does it help me to just spiral at that point? So I'm like, I'm so grateful I didn't leave to
Well,
go somewhere else for this interview. I can get back up. It's itty bitty little baby
the
steps
little baby steps.
to get you through there. And, if it's all you can do that day is, oh, thank goodness I could, run up the stairs and be back and find out what I needed to do. That's good enough for that moment. I consider it the bread comes back to your integration.
Right. So kind of going back to the nervous system and neuroscience type questions that I've got for you, I'm curious to know what happens to the brain and the body when someone lives in survival mode for too long.
The body starts breaking down. To be candid, you start, I mean, even grief things, like when somebody lets me know somebody's passed, which obviously I hear a lot of. I do a lot of that kind of work. It's, kind of attached to me as I evolve as a human being. I've said over and over again, I hear you. I get it. I would like to give you 3 constructive comments that I just want you to follow verbatim right now. And they're like, "Okay." And it's like, you need to be aware that your senses are going to slow down. Your reaction time is delayed. So driving a car, please be extra cautious. Slow down, go under the limit. If you can, Uber places instead of, I'm not trying to sell a brand, but, do something like that. So that's one piece that I might give somebody. Second is do something physical for your body. If we
Will
just
be
lost
around.
a job, right? If we just lost a job or something, we may have canceled our gym membership, or maybe our job was where the gym membership was,
Right.
right? Well, okay, I get that, but at least go for a walk, etc. And then this will sound incredibly unusual, but anyone I ever work with, I always highly recommend a good day and a bad day playlist, because we do know that music can do things that we can't for ourselves.
That's so true.
And then there's another step in there. I think a lot of people don't tell people they have needs. They become invisible. Nobody cares, or some of us have interesting family dynamics that make life all the more complicated, right?
Right.
And so the additional step is, I've suggested, if when you're working with me or talking to me, you haven't already done these things, that you hashtag name your bad day playlist.
Okay.
And using that as a technique or a skill, just tell 3 people what your bad day playlist is. So at one time, my daughter used Brave for her hashtag bad day playlist while her dad was dying.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in fact, we introduced that to the high schools. I do this good day, bad day playlist idea all the time with, leadership skill itself. I'll introduce it in corporate America, but imagine my daughter's high school is learning this skill. So let's go a step further. And she has the hashtag brave. Well, her job, this was an all-girls private school, and God, they were the best. They were so part of the support for my family and my daughter during my worst time, and I will always honor them. And the things I'm telling you now was after he passed, I asked if I could give back for everything they gave us
Oh,
and run their leadership academy. Um, and so the hashtag brave, um, she didn't know. I mean, imagine a human that has been unfortunately raped, or something, or accosted or had a horrible accident or that spiral of depression. Tell 3 people the name of it and be willing, if you can't do anything else, just text, you and I, hashtag brave. And that is your early alert that somebody needs to come see you, find you, understand stuff. But now let's go back to it being applied in leadership. I have introduced this concept over and over again. And at the high school, as a starting place, I told the administration that we had taught them this. And so they came back with this amazing policy that you could write it in lipstick on the bathroom mirror.
okay.
You put a post-it note because you didn't know what else to do on your locker. And so the administration of this school was always on the lookout for that call for help.
Right.
Well, why can't we extrapolate on that and give that as a tool to anybody and everyone we know?
Absolutely.
I call it the white flag of help required.
Yeah, because often, it's a cry for help that people just don't know how to get that off their chest, whatever it is that's, weighing heavily.
Yeah. And so those are
Incredible.
some kind of good, kind of interesting, very effective techniques using the neuroscience piece.
So what would you say that you're currently learning in this chapter of your life?
Primary thing that I'm learning in this chapter is what happens when usefulness becomes your identity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, you know, things like rest starts to feel irresponsible, needlessness feels dangerous, worth becomes tied to output. How do we quiet those things? And how do you stop running faster and doing more and be okay with stopping?
Right. Because it's the
And
stillness that often, like, slowing down is so uncomfortable for people.
I used to I have always loved the technique of meditation.
Me
And
too.
I actually, early on in my career, I I taught people how to do technical demonstrations. I was living in high tech, one of the best companies ever, not anymore, but back then. And I remember being flabbergasted by this woman who came in, and her demonstration was of how to cleanse your chakras and calm yourself down. And I'm like looking at
Eye-opening. Yeah.
right, and I'm looking at her going, "This is a technical demonstration in a Fortune 500 company? Huh?" Oh, little did I know what a gift she was for the rest of my life at the time, right? But I think our identities are so attached to the doing
Mhm. Absolutely.
that the stopping and being okay and getting quiet and listening and not going faster is probably the thing I've learned the most.
So now that you've gone through all these things, What would you say that healing means to you now?
Ooh. There's a quote I've been using for a great many years, and I'm going to forget who wrote it, so I apologize in advance. Um, the quote is, "Trauma are changes you don't choose. Healing are the changes you do."
Ah, I like that.
So let's extrapolate from that. I had to choose that I wanted to heal. I had to choose to do things differently. Suddenly being widowed with young kids and, doing it all on my own, etc. And I would be the first to tell you I lived in that trauma for a grand amount of time. Okay.
Mhm.
It just is. I didn't know any other way. And in fact, my identity was then the strong, running a business, look at all she's done.
Right.
And to get comfortable with the healing part of it, which is the changes I needed to make when I was ready, even the little ones, and moving forward and seeing the world in a whole new way, let alone attaching to what could I be grateful for after all the hell I had been through.
Right. Wow. Okay. So to wrap this up, I have one last question I want to ask you. I want to know, what does living authentically truly mean to you?
Seeing people where they are.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Just no edit, open-hearted, let them be whoever they wanna be. May I share a
Huh?
small
Please.
so, I moved a couple years after. I wanted, which I didn't even realize I was living in that trauma from that quote I gave you
Hmm.
day in, day out, because everybody around me knew me as that woman, dot, 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 that, right?
Yeah.
And so I decided to move. And that's how I ended up in Oregon. Fabulous place. By the way. And, yeah, I have my company. Yeah, I'm doing all this work. Yeah, I'm coaching. Yeah, I'm long time in leadership, for, decades. And the town I live in has an amphitheater and they hire summer employment.
Okay.
And I came to this realization that I live in this town, but I moved here when I wasn't going to really meet people the natural way. I didn't have kids in schools when I moved here. Yes, I have found a spiritual community. I met them, but they all have their own agenda and plan. How do I just live life in joy and boldness and meet new people? So I became this is my 4th year, I think. And every summer, for very little money, but it doesn't matter, I am out there for 6 to 8 hours. Yes, I get to hear the music all the time, but I also get to live in unadulterated joy and connect with people and make itty bitty little differences and see each individual that shows up, whether it's a patron or a peer or a new leader or, the weatherman that we have thunder and lightning and we're going to have to empty the venue in a minute, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to just show up with no identity, no agenda, and day in and day out, see people however they can. And now at this point, years in, I know amazing people in our community. I think I know just about every teacher and administrator in schools for 5 towns across. Had some really amusing moments with actual bands at some point in time. But I think the end result is finding joy and showing up to witness it was probably my biggest healing breakthrough. So leaving all other identities behind.
Absolutely. That's what you got to do. Oh, this has been beautiful. Thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast today. I have enjoyed picking your brain, and hearing all the different stories that you have is truly inspirational. I am going to have your info in the show notes so that if people are looking for you, they can just pop into the link in the bio and they can find you where you are at. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been an unadulterated pleasure.